Hello, my name is Dr. Rudkin and I'm a clinical psychologist who works with children and families, and it is my pleasure to talk to you today about looking after yourself when you're going through a separation or a divorce. This is session 4 in our What About Aruna series, brought to you by Only Mums and Only Dads, and it's all about how we can put our children first. But in order to put our children first, we also need to look after ourselves. So the aim of this session is to help you understand that to look after others, we need to look after ourselves. That divorce is a very stressful time, and taking care of yourself means that you are then more available to take care of your child. So we're going to look at some different tips and strategies, including how to use your network, getting to know your thoughts, decoupling and co-parenting, and a little bit about stress management at the end. So you've probably heard the analogy about putting your own oxygen mask on before you put your child's on, which is what we're told in the safety briefing on an aeroplane. And we use it a lot when we talk about emotional looking after as well. You need to put your own oxygen mask on before you can look after your child's. And I've worked with parents who say, but hold on, aren't I being really selfish putting my own oxygen mask on first? And we talk about actually the context of that. What they're saying on the aeroplane safety briefing is not disregard your child, don't pay them any attention at all, just grab the oxygen mask for yourself and stick it on. They're not saying that. What they're saying is, in order for you to be able to look after your child, you can put your oxygen mask on while consoling and comforting your child, and then very calmly stick their oxygen mask on. That is the ideal. So this is what we're hoping today from this session. It's about helping you to put your own oxygen mask on so that you can put on your child's. So it isn't either or, it is both. So by looking after yourself, you're sending a very clear message to others that you are valuable and worth looking after. And as well as that, you're teaching your child how to take care of themselves too. So we know from all of our other videos that children learn, they will watch and imitate you as parents. So they learn by watching. So if they watch you look after yourself and value yourself, chances are they will look after and value you, but they will look after and value themselves too. So a really important lesson for them. And self-care has an eye on the long term. So you know every day when you're making those decisions about self-care, the short-term benefits versus the long-term benefits. Do I have that chocolate because I just really feel like I need it now? But what about in the future? How is it going to weigh on me, literally? So it's all about the short-term versus long-term. So it's not about avoidance. Self-care is not about never putting yourself in a challenging position, but it's about doing it with compassion and care. It's about thinking of short-term, weighing up the short-term versus long-term benefits, the immediate release, and it's also about having a long-term healthy approach to life. So self-care, it's a tricky lifelong project that we all have to engage in, but particularly when you're going through a difficult time like you're going through at the moment. So the very first thing we need to think about is how to use our support networks. So you will know by now that divorce traditionally creates a process of taking sides. So you'll have friends who are couples who've had to take sides, yours or your partner's, and then very quickly you get an in-group and an out-group. Loads of psychology research about in-group and out-group. So in our in-group, we tend to believe and trust people a lot more, and people in the out-group, we are naturally quite suspicious of, and they need to earn your trust. So you've got the in-group and the out-group. But where does your child sit? Because you and your partner are still very important to them, and so they're not part of this in-group, out-group, but your support network is. So what is really important is that you don't just get rid of those people who may question you or challenge you. Oh, so when you said your partner did that, do you think they really meant to do that? Now that can seem quite threatening to you when you're feeling quite hurt and wounded, but actually we need people around us who are going to question us and very gently challenge us. Are you sure that's the version of the truth that you're going to hold on to? Are you sure that's what happened? Or do you think there could have been another reason why they did that? Really important to have those people around us. Now, somebody once talked to me about sinks versus radiators. Sinks are the people who drain you. They just leave you empty and drained, and radiators are the people that warm you up. So at any point in life, but particularly after a separation and during and before a separation divorce, you'll need radiators around you. So choose these people carefully. Who do you want around you to support you? Now, I don't know if you remember in the child development session, session 1, we talked about theory of mind, an ability that tends to develop around the age of 4 or 5, and which is your ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So use your theory of mind to help you get a good support network around you. People don't know what you know, so you're going to have to tell them. Don't just assume people know how you're thinking. Don't assume people will understand and accept and immediately know what you're thinking. You have to explain to them. Now, your story is a very important story because it's your story. We all live by stories. This doesn't mean that our life is a work of fiction, but it means that we create narratives about our lives. What story do you tell yourself about your life, and what were the highs and lows? So, for example, when I'm working with children, and often adults, parents, we will do a timeline of their life and we will plot out their story with a beginning, a middle, an end, up to now, and then a future. And in this story we can plot the highs and lows and we can figure out the good and the bad bits, but it's a way of making sense of our lives. And sometimes it takes something like a crisis, like a separation or a divorce, for us to have to stop and think, whoa, how do we make sense of all of this? And we also have a parenting script. So we have a story about the kind of parent we are and how we parent. Now, you'll have had many, many moments during a parenting journey where you'll have thought to yourself, oh, I sound just like my dad, or I sound just like my mum. And the idea is, when we parent, we either repeat or we correct our script of being parented. So you either do what was done to you, or you choose to correct it. You think, I do not want my child to ever feel the way that I did when I was a child and that happened to me. So I'm going to correct that parenting script. So it's very important for you to have a think about, are you repeating or correcting? It's neither good or bad, it's just about knowing which one you're doing and knowing you've got the choice. If you find yourself just repeating, then maybe you'll think, you know what, I'm not sure I want to just keep repeating this parenting script. Maybe I want to correct it and do something completely different. So my question to you is, what would be the title of your story, of your life story? What would be the title? The very first thing that comes into your mind will be the telling thing. That will be a clue as to what is important for you and how you think about yourself. I don't know, maybe your heading was, I'm amazing and it's all wonderful. Great. But for most of us, our headings will be something like, oh, I've messed it up again. Or, why didn't I see that coming? Or, oh, why do I never get anything right? And in which case then we know this is the important title that we need to have a little work on. Maybe I need to go and get some help in figuring that out. Now, getting to know your thoughts. This is also incredibly important, as well as getting to know your stories and your scripts. What's going through your mind? So we assume that what happens to us affects how we feel. But any of you that have been through CBT, cognitive behaviour therapy, or heard about CBT will know there's a missing link. That actually is not what happens to you that affects how you feel. It's how you think about what happens to you. And that is why the same thing can happen to many different people and they all feel very differently. Even though they've all been through the same thing. It's because they're thinking differently about it. And that's what you need to figure out. So when you're going through this whole process of separation and divorce and all the conflict that it's brought up, all the sadness and the worry and the stress, what are the thoughts that it's triggered off? Now, the kinds of thinking errors we can all get into here. So what I mean by that is patterns of thinking. So when life is going well, I don't know if you remember the river of well-being from session 3, but it's all about when life is going well and you're just rowing merrily in the middle of the river, things are fine. You don't need to think about things too much. You're just doing and being. But when a storm comes, when a crisis happens, we get pushed into different ways of thinking and feeling. And these thinking patterns can get stuck and they can become quite dominant. So thinking errors or unhelpful thinking we would talk about. So here are some of them. Catastrophizing. So when I'm talking to children, we talk about snowball thoughts. You know, we start off a little thought and before you know it, it's massive. So oh, I'm going to mess this up. That means I'm going to lose my job. If I lose my job, I'll lose my home. If I lose my home, no one will love me. And suddenly, before you know it, you've written yourself off completely through catastrophizing. Now, all or nothing thinking. Do you remember we mentioned this when we were talking about adolescent development? Well, we don't ever completely grow out of it. It's our tendency to think all or nothing. Something's either brilliant or awful, or someone is either fantastic or terrible. And of course, as we know by now, the reality is somewhere in the middle. Mind reading. So have you ever done that? Oh, I know exactly what they're thinking of me. I can tell. I can just tell by the way that they're looking at me. Can you? Can you really? Because I've had a lot of training in psychology and I still can't read minds. I wish I could. I can't. None of us can really read minds. We can guess, but we can't really know what someone's thinking. So don't jump to conclusions and assume you know what someone's thinking. Emotional reasoning is the kind of thinking we do based on emotions rather than fact. I feel stupid, therefore I must be. I feel fat, therefore I must be. So this emotional reasoning, it has a place, but if that becomes the only way of thinking, then it means you're going to be making decisions based on really skewed bits of life. Fortune telling. It's a little bit like mind reading, where you know exactly how this is going to pan out. I know exactly what's going to happen. I'm going to walk into that meeting, I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to stand up to speak, and I'm going to say the wrong thing. Do you know that? Really? Because again, I'm not sure anyone can really tell the future. So don't get trapped into fortune telling and assuming, if I go on that date, I know what's going to happen. They're going to hate me. May do, they may not do. We don't know. I doubt they will. And then we've got discounting the positives, which we all do. So when something does go well, or we're having quite a nice time, I don't know, or think life just seems to be going okay, we discount the positives. Oh, that doesn't count. No, when they gave me a compliment, they didn't really mean it. They were only just making it up. Or I did really well in that. No, I didn't really. It was easy. Anybody could have done it well. Discounting the positives. By doing that, we never give ourselves credit. So these are very common unhelpful thinking or thinking errors that we can all get stuck in. I want you to have a think about which one of those did you hear about and go, oh, yeah, I definitely do that. Because we'll have our signature thinking errors, all of us. There'll be a couple that we tend to do. If you're a bit anxious, it might be the catastrophizing. If you're a bit unsure of yourself, it might be that fortune telling and future, mind reading, being able to tell the future. If you've got low self-esteem, it'd be that kind of rubbishing yourself, discounting the positives. There's all sorts of things that we do. But if you can get to know your thinking patterns, then it means next time you're stuck in a moment, in a storm, and you think, why am I in this situation again? Just have a moment to stop and think, hold on, am I doing any of those thinking errors? Really important. Because once you've figured out what the thinking errors are, then you can start to change them. So, challenging your thoughts, we assume because we're thinking something, it must be the truth. No, no, no. Our thinking can be so skewed that you would not believe it. We live in a very, very wonky world in our heads, and our thoughts really contribute to that. So, if you're having a thought that isn't making you feel good and isn't making you act in a way that you particularly want to, then stop and think, okay, what is the impact of this thought on my feelings and behaviour? If I'm going around thinking that this person is the worst person imaginable and I hate them so much and I don't ever want to see them again because they're horrible, how is that impacting on my feelings and my behaviour? And if I took that thought to court, many of you will have been through court, but if you take that thought to court and looked for evidence that they are horrible and they are nasty, what evidence is there? Yeah, there'll be some things that they've done that suggest that they are horrible and nasty, but are there other things that they've done that suggest they're not entirely horrible and nasty? Or if your thought is, I'm never going to be able to cope with this, take that thought to court. What's the evidence for that? Have you coped with bad things, difficult things in the past? Did you get through it okay? Okay, so maybe that thought doesn't necessarily stand up in court. Putting yourself in someone else's shoes, we've talked about theory of mind, but being able to see things from someone else's perspective sometimes helps us to understand our own. It doesn't mean there's a right or wrong, it just means there's a different perspective. It might help. And is this thought helping me have the best life I can? Because if the thoughts are full of injustice, making you feel angry all of the time, is this the best life I can have? Do I maybe need to change that thought to mean that I have a less angry life, a bit calmer life? And also, the important thing is when we're worried about something and we get very anxious and we're very stressed, you need to stop and think, what's the worst that can happen? And will I be able to cope with that? With separation and divorce, often the worst has happened for you. You know, either you've been abandoned, or you've abandoned somebody, or you feel rejected or unloved. Have you been able to cope with it? Not been easy. But yeah, you know, I've got up most days, got dressed most days. I'm kind of getting there. So yes, you can cope with it. So it's just being able to challenge your thoughts in a way that helps you to see there's different ways of seeing life. And that can lead to different feelings. Now, decoupling and co-parenting. These are parts of separating and divorcing as a parent. So the challenges of co-parenting. The vast majority of exes are considered to be narcissists. Now, chances are not all of these exes are narcissists, but we feel that they are. Remember the emotional reasoning? We feel that they're narcissists. So it's really hard to think positive thoughts about someone who's really, really hurt you. But that isn't helping you to lead the best life that you can. And what can happen is that as you get to co-parent, it can get a little bit imbalanced with the resident parent becoming the expert on the child and having to interpret for the other parent. Oh, when he always does that now at meal times, or when she says this is what she means. And this can actually create a lot of conflict in co-parenting, because you both want to be the experts. Of course you do, even if you don't see your child for some days of the week. And when there's conflict and disagreement, it's very easy to focus on your ex-partner's negative characteristics, because this will justify your conflict and your anger with them. You know, when you're really, really cross with your partner and then they do something and you just think, this is obviously pre-divorce, oh, they're actually really lovely. And then your brain pushes that thought away about them being really lovely, because that doesn't fit with your angry story about them right now. So what you've got to do is really, really try hard not to focus on just their negative characteristics, because this can lead to all sorts of issues, including you starting to think about safeguarding issues, care for the child, blah, 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 because all you're doing is focusing on the negative aspects of your ex-partner. There's been lots of research about co-parenting and what makes it easier, harder. It will be no surprise to you that anger is a major obstacle to successful co-parenting. Anger predicts relationship breakup, and it also gets in the way of the co-parenting after the breakup. And anger is considered to be one of the emotionally distancing feelings, along with rage, hatred, disgust, contempt. Because what they do is they distance you from having to emotionally engage with that person. Pushes them away. I hate them. I'm so cross with them. And actually that makes it very, very difficult to then co-parent with them. So what you're going to have to do is tolerate and accept the fact that there's going to be some of this emotionally distancing feelings, but also what are the less emotionally distancing feelings, like acceptance, tolerance. You know, doesn't mean you've got to love them, but being able to accept them is very, very important. Because of course, here's your little child, or your children. You're in the process of decoupling, so both of you are separating, but you've got to do that without de-parenting, because your child or your children need you now more than ever. So while you're decoupling, you need to not de-parent. And that's a lot to ask, but by being able to manage your feelings, get to know your thoughts, it makes it a little bit easier. And what co-parenting has been found to be is that you're motivated by concern for the child rather than concern for your ex's well-being. So this is no longer parenting according to the well-being of the other parent. So maybe before the separation and divorce, you can remember times where you thought, oh, I won't do that because it will make them feel, my partner feel cross or stressed or anxious. When you separate or divorce, suddenly that doesn't matter at all. It's about just, what do I want to do for my child? And that's hard, because you've still got to want to know what your ex is thinking and feeling, and still need to vaguely be concerned for their well-being so that they can still look after the child that you've had together. So keeping conflict low is really important. And we talked about conflict a couple of sessions ago, that is one of the major culprits of your child struggling with a separation and divorce. So conflict is bad for them and it's not great for you. So ideally, you would decouple as a parent. You would accept the fact that as a team, you are now decoupling. I am separating from my partner. We no longer love each other anymore. And then you would move into different homes, and then you would go to the lawyer and legally decouple. That's the ideal sequence. However, what is often the case is the lawyer's the first bit of decoupling. You go fuming into that lawyer's office, full of hatred, full of that emotionally distancing feelings, with loads of emotional thinking, loads of catastrophizing, loads of mind reading, fortune telling, all or nothing thinking, discounting the positives. And then you may consider doing the physical and geographical decoupling, and only then might you start doing the emotional decoupling. And this is a really unstable way of doing it. It's an unstable pyramid. It's going to fall apart. It's going to collapse. So trying to do that emotional decoupling first, as two adults, is the best way to start off the process. So when we look at dads and mums when they're decoupling, like I said, when we're looking at boys and girls, there are more similarities than differences between men and women. Just like there are more similarities than differences between boys and girls. So between men and women divorce, they're more similar than different. But some researchers suggest that men may experience higher rates of depression straight after a divorce than women. So you divorce, men feel higher levels, or there are higher levels of depression, higher rates of depression in men. And as part of that, men grieve the loss of children and family life, but they do that more than the loss of a partner. And that could be very difficult for the ex-partner. Like, don't you care at all anymore? And for that father, it might be, well, no, I care more about the fact that I'm no longer living there with my child, and I'm no longer part of that family life, and I no longer see my child every day. And men are slightly more likely to express their mourning through actions rather than words. So they may just take themselves off completely. They may think, you know what, they're better off without me. So I'll just leave them to it. I'll just go. And while that might make that dad feel like they're helping things, actually for that child or those children, heartbroken. They'll be heartbroken because we know absence is a big culprit of real significant impacts of divorce. So men may be tempted to do that. And men may have difficulty separating their role as husband from their role of fathers, meaning they find it harder to move forward with a distinct fathering identity. And of course, if you were a father that was very involved with your child's life before separation, then it is going to be easier to be very involved with your child's life after separation. But if it involves a whole recreation of your fathering identity, it is going to be difficult. To the point where one researcher concluded these findings suggest that men's disproportionate strain of divorce is transient, whereas women's is chronic. And remember, this mirrors what happens to boys and girls when they're going through separation and divorce. Boys are the ones who tend to have that sort of big reaction initially, and then they sort of settle down. The girls might look like they're coping fine, but it all comes out a few years later. And it seems like this is somehow mirrored in dads and mums as well. So as part of this decoupling, there's a chance that there's new partners and blended families. And there's a whole session we could do on this, but just to very quickly go through what it's like for children when their mums and dads get new partners and they have to start living in blended families. So very much you need to understand your child's perspective, because for them it is not exciting that you have found a new partner. They do not think your new partner is the bee's knees and the funniest, most attractive, wonderful person in the world. They don't, because it's not their mum or it's not their dad. So just because you're excited and positive about your new partner, it doesn't mean your child will be. You've got to give them time. And this isn't because they're being mean, it's just genuinely they're not that excited about it. Keeping to routines. So if you are bringing your child into a new family, keep life as similar as possible for all the children. Easier said than done, I know. And take small steps and make gradual introductions to your new partner. With step siblings, suddenly children could be living with somebody who's exactly the same age as them, or they might be living with someone who's 10 years younger or older. And if you remember all the child development info we talked about in the first session, children need different things at different ages. So this might help you, if you can remember the child development stuff, it might help you to understand each individual child's needs and why some things are difficult for some of the children more than others. Go at your child's pace, be patient and give it time, but also be consistent. So the research shows that children who have step parenting teams who are working consistently together is better for the child. So 3 of you parenting your child. There's you, their other parent, and then your new partner. So if all 3 of you, and if the other partner has a new partner, then there's 4 of you. If you can all consistently agree on how you want to bring your child up, remember the authoritative parenting, then actually that is the best thing for your child. Now, it is very stressful separating and divorcing, and it's a process. We've talked about this in all the other sessions. It's a process. It's not a one-off event, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. And you may have days where you think you've absolutely got it and you cracked it, and you'll have other days where you just think, I can't do this anymore. Hang on in there and use all of these very simple stress management techniques, because each one in itself might not really do something, but pulled together they can definitely keep you going. Okay, so you know exercise is important, and you know you can make all the excuses in the world for why you haven't got time to do it, or energy or motivation. 5 minutes, just go and run around the block for 5 minutes. That's all you need to do to get started. And a good diet as well. Eating well is feeding your body with good stuff, which means then you feel more able to cope with the world. Don't run away from difficult things, because avoiding something does not make it go away. It just makes it grow and grow and grow. So tackle it step by step. Therapy or counselling, I know I would say this as a clinical psychologist, but it can be so helpful when we're thinking about all of those thinking areas and those scripts and the stories and the narratives. Just being able to talk about it with somebody who knows what they're doing can be really, really useful. And express your feelings, whether that's in writing or songs or down the pub with your friends or whatever. Talk about your feelings, because every time you talk about them, you process them just a little bit more. It's like eating a massive meal. You can't just go down in one go. You've got to chew it and eat it bit by bit. That is what our big feelings are like. By expressing them, we're starting to process them. Relaxation and imagery can be really important, especially for particularly stressful times, or if you can't get to sleep at night time. Just think about a relaxing place, because here, I'll let you into something here, our brains cannot tell whether something is real or imagined, which is why if I asked you to think about your very favourite meal and you imagine it in front of you and you can almost imagine smelling it and you're about to tuck into it, have you got loads of saliva in your mouth? Yes, because your brain's thinking about this meal, so it's acting as if that meal is there. And we know about all the sexual stuff as well. Just imagining can create body feelings in us. So imagining you're somewhere nice and safe and calm and relaxing will make our body react as if it was there. So that's very important to do at times of stress. Get to know your own early warning signs. So what are the things that happen to you that tell you you're beginning to get very stressed or very sad, or that you're struggling to cope? It could be your sleep going, it could be eating more or eating less, it could be not returning messages, it could be not turning up to work. Whatever it is, get to know your own early warning signs, because it's so much easier to deal with them before they've grown really, really big. And tell other people what your early warning signs are. You know, if you sent me a text and I haven't replied within 3 days, come and see me, because I'm starting to avoid things then and I need your help. And get the support you need sooner rather than later. It's so much easier, as I say, to deal with things on the way up than when they get to the top. So, here are my closing thoughts. In order to decouple, both of you as parents need help and need support to cope with the transitions and the relationships, because everything changes. Need help to be effective parents within a new family context, and remember that authoritative parenting where you've got high responsiveness but high demands. You're still expecting a lot of your child, but you're doing that with warmth and love. You need help and support in taking care of your emotional health so that you can help your child with theirs, and to cope with your stress so that you are not a stressed parent for your child. This takes time. You cannot do it alone. So recruit people into your team who you trust and who help you have a balanced view. Don't just keep hold of those people who agree with everything you say, because that's, nice to know that they agree with everything you say, but they might not be the most helpful people to have around. So have the radiators around you. And know that this is a marathon, not a sprint. You will get through it and you will learn so much from it. But it's just hang on in there while you go through the process. So I hope there's been some help to you in learning how to look after yourself in the midst of separation and divorce, so that you can then look after your child or your children. And this is all done, made possible to be done thanks to the wonderful sponsors. So thank you very much for listening. Please like, subscribe, and please feel free to share this with your network if you think it will be helpful. Take care. Bye-bye.